Mom and Dad gave us this house, Sloan announced from my front porch, smiling at 120 wedding guests. Applause rolled across the lawn, then she added, "Rowan will move out after the honeymoon." I stepped through my own front door in work clothes, holding the deed in one hand and the unsigned transfer papers in the other. No, they didn't. Mom rushed toward me. "Don't ruin your sister's wedding." I looked at the boxes marked Rowan Storage, the ribbon tied around my pen, and the sign calling my home the Rourke House. You can't give away what you don't own. "No, you're all leaving now." Then Caleb asked Sloan one question. 6 hours earlier. I was finishing an inspection report in Charleston when my phone buzzed. It was June Halpern, my neighbor. "Are you hosting a wedding?" "There are trucks blocking the road." Below the message were 3 photographs. A white tent covered my lawn. Florists were carrying arches through my gate. A catering van sat beside the garage. At the end of my driveway stood a painted sign. "Welcome to the Rourke House." I called Mom. No answer. Dad declined twice, then sent one text. "Don't overreact. We'll explain when you get here." I closed my laptop and left. I had bought the house near Lake Norman 5 years earlier after nearly a decade of saving. The mortgage, insurance, taxes, and deed were all in my name. My parents had never paid toward the purchase. Dad had helped during renovations. He met contractors when I traveled, painted part of the fence, and recommended a carpenter. I appreciated every hour. Somewhere along the way, helping me became owning it in his stories. At my housewarming, Mom had raised her glass and said, "Our family finally has a lake house." Sloan had looked across the lawn and laughed. "This would be perfect for my wedding." Everyone smiled. So did I. I should have corrected them then. Instead, I did what I had always done. When Sloan wrecked the used car I had saved for in college, Mom said she needed it more that night. When my parents moved my belongings into the smaller bedroom so Sloan could have mine, they said I was barely home anyway. I was always the capable daughter, which meant I was expected to survive whatever they took. By the time I reached Lake Norman, cars lined both sides of the road. A valet stepped in front of my SUV. Name. "Please, I live here." He glanced at his clipboard. "I don't have a Rowan listed." June stood near her mailbox and waved me over. She showed me photographs taken throughout the morning chairs arriving, ribbons tied to my porch, strangers entering with the access code I had given Dad for emergencies only. I walked around to the side of the house. The garage door was open. Inside, my books, clothes, framed photographs, and kitchen boxes had been stacked against the wall. Each carton carried the same label in black marker, Rowan Storage. No one had borrowed my house for a wedding. They had already started moving me out. I entered through the kitchen using my own code. The house no longer looked like mine. My family photographs had been removed from the living room wall. The sofa was pushed against the windows to make space for a guest book table. In place of the picture of me holding the keys on closing day stood a framed engagement portrait of Sloan and Caleb. Mom appeared from the hallway carrying a box of champagne glasses. "You're early. This is my house. We know that," she said, as if I were being childish. The venue had a plumbing disaster. We had no choice. I walked past her. My bedroom door stood open. My clothes were gone. Sloan's white bridal robe hung from the closet handle, and 2 suitcases rested beside my bed. A wooden sign on the dresser read, "Mr. and Mrs. Rourke. You said this was one day." I told Dad when he came upstairs. "It is." "Then why are there suitcases in my bedroom? We'll sort everything out after the honeymoon." Mom folded her arms. "We only moved what you weren't using. I was using my home." A woman with a headset hurried into the room. She introduced herself as Ainsley Park, the wedding planner. "I was told Mr. and Mrs. Whitaker owned the property," she said carefully. "Your mother provided the access code and signed as event host. She does not own this house." Ainsley's expression changed. I was also told ownership was being transferred to the couple today. Before I could answer, Caleb appeared in the doorway, already dressed except for his jacket. "Rowan." He smiled with obvious relief. "I wanted to thank you in person. This house is more than we ever imagined." "What house?" His smile faded. Sloan rushed in behind him. "Caleb, the photographer needs you outside." He looked between us. "For the gift." I never gave you a house. Sloan took his arm. She just got off a flight. We can explain later, after she pulled him away. I noticed a white folder beside the guest book downstairs. Inside was a quitclaim deed listing me as the person transferring the property to Sloan and Caleb. My signature line was blank. A business card for a mobile notary had been clipped to the corner. Beside it lay a silver pen tied with white ribbon. For the family's next chapter. Someone had written across the cover. A woman waiting in the dining room introduced herself as Evelyn Sato. I was scheduled to witness your signature after the ceremony, she said. I have never seen this document. Evelyn closed her notary journal immediately. Then I will not be witnessing anything today. Sloan returned and saw the folder in my hands. If Mom and Dad already gave you the house, I asked, why do you need my signature? Her jaw tightened. It's just the formal part. That was when I understood the wedding guests were not witnesses to a gift. They were the pressure my family planned to use to make me surrender one. I carried the folder onto the back porch, where Ainsley was speaking into her headset. Pause every vendor, I said. Mom stepped between us. Absolutely not. Everything is paid for. Ainsley looked from me to the house. Are you withdrawing permission for the event I never gave it? She checked the contract on her tablet. Mom had signed as event host, not property owner. Ainsley nodded once and told the caterer to stop service. The string quartet lowered their instruments. Dad's face reddened. You're overreacting to an emergency. What emergency? The venue flooded, Mom said. Ainsley glanced up. Hawthorne Mill did not report a flood. Caleb had followed us outside. What do you mean, he asked? Ainsley answered carefully. The reservation was canceled because the final balance was not paid. Caleb turned to Sloan. I gave you $28,000. I used part of it for the business, she said, temporarily. You told me the venue refunded us. It will be fine once we're living here without a mortgage. His eyes moved to the unsigned deed and the ribboned pen in my hand. You planned our finances around a house Rowan never gave us. Mom cut in. Rowan lives here alone. She travels constantly. This house is wasted on one person. Dad pointed toward the house. I put my own hands into this place. You helped me paint a fence, I said. You did not buy my life. Mom's expression hardened. Your sister is starting a family. What are you protecting all this for? You can stay in hotels like you always do. I looked through the open garage at the boxes carrying my name. Beyond them, the driveway sign had already replaced mine with Sloan's future surname. They did not think they were stealing my home. They thought my life was empty space waiting for someone else's marriage. I gave them one final option. Stop the ceremony. Tell the guests the location was changed without my consent. Move the reception to a restaurant or hotel. No one signs anything. Mom shook her head. If you humiliate Sloan today, whatever happens to her marriage is on you. I'm not the one who built it on a lie. Music began across the lawn. Sloan gathered her skirt and hurried toward the front porch. Caleb called her name, but she ignored him. She took the microphone, faced 120 guests, and smiled. Then she began her wedding speech with the house she had never been given. Sloan stood on my front porch beneath the white flowers, holding a microphone. Before we begin, Caleb and I want to thank Mom and Dad for the greatest wedding gift we could receive. Mom lifted her chin. Dad placed a hand over his heart. Sloan turned toward the house. Mom and Dad gave us this house. Applause rolled across the lawn. Some guests stood, others raised their phones. We'll move in after the honeymoon, she continued. Rowan will move out by then. The applause weakened. People looked toward the driveway, where I stood in work clothes with the unsigned deed in my hand. I walked through my own front door and onto the porch. No, I said, they didn't. Sloane's smile tightened. This isn't the time. You made it the time when you announced my eviction to 120 people. Mom rushed toward me. Do not ruin your sister's wedding. I held up the recorded deed. You cannot give away what you do not own. Dad stepped forward. We can finish the paperwork after the ceremony. You mean this paperwork I opened the white folder, the document you prepared without telling me with my signature line blank, a notary waiting inside, and a pen tied with ribbon like a wedding favor. The guests nearest the porch began looking at one another. Evelyn Sato stepped into the doorway. "Ms. Whitaker has never agreed to sign," she said. "I will not notarize this document." Ainsley raised her headset microphone. "Without the property owner's permission, my vendors cannot continue operating here." The caterers closed their stations. The quartet lowered their bows. Sloane's voice sharpened. "Everyone is already here. The ceremony will take 20 minutes. You had 10 days to ask me. You chose an audience instead." Caleb walked toward the porch. "Did Rowan ever say she would give us this house?" Sloane glanced at Mom. "That isn't what I asked," he said. "Did Rowan ever say yes?" "She always says no first. That still isn't yes." Sloane's face flushed. "We knew she would say no if we asked." The silence was heavier than the applause had been. Caleb removed the flower pinned to his jacket. "Then you knew this house was never ours. You're taking her side. I'm taking the side of the truth you kept from me." Mom stepped between them. "This family does not need to discuss private matters before strangers." "You invited the strangers," I said. "You needed them to make it harder for me to refuse." Sloane turned on me. "You're ruining my wedding over a house." "No, you built your wedding inside a lie and expected my front door to hold it up." Mom's eyes filled. "You're choosing property over your sister. My life does not become temporary because hers includes a wedding." I faced the guests. "I'm sorry you were brought here under false information. None of you did anything wrong. The vendors were told my parents owned this property. They do not. I never approved this event, and I never agreed to transfer my home." A woman near the aisle lowered her gift bag. "The ceremony cannot happen here. Please collect your belongings and follow the vendor's directions." Dad blocked the steps. "No one is going anywhere until this family talks. We already did." When he refused to move, I called the non-emergency line. Caleb turned to Sloane. "I'm postponing the wedding. You can't. I can't marry you today while I'm learning what else you lied about." Nora Rourke took her son's arm and led him toward the driveway. By the time Deputy Boone arrived, chairs were being folded. He checked my identification and the property record. Then he addressed my parents calmly. "The homeowner has withdrawn permission. Everyone needs to leave. Anyone who refuses may be treated as trespassing." There were no handcuffs and no screaming guests. The vendors packed their equipment. Families carried purses and flowers to their cars. June kept the road clear. Sloane stood among the emptying rows of white chairs. "You ruined everything." I looked at the sign calling my home the Rourke House. "You didn't give her my house. I told my parents. You gave her a lie and expected me to pay for it." Mom still seemed to believe I would soften. I stepped into the doorway. "No. You're all leaving now," when the last car disappeared. The house was quiet again, but my entire life remained packed inside boxes marked for storage. That night, I changed every access code before I unpacked a single box. I photographed the scratches across the oak floor, the holes drilled into the living room wall, and the cracked frame that had once held my closing day picture. Then I called the storage company and arranged to have my belongings returned. I did not touch the wedding gifts. I did not keep the flowers. I did not charge the vendors for believing what my parents had told them. My attorney sent a demand letter for the storage fees, the damaged property, and the cost of restoring the house. There was no lawsuit over ownership because ownership had never changed. The unsigned deed had been nothing more than a trap with a ribbon around it. Caleb spent the next 2 weeks reviewing every account he shared with Sloane. He discovered the venue payment had never been made. Part of his savings had gone into her business debts, and she had already arranged furniture delivery for my house. Her plan had been to move in first, then make my refusal look cruel and impractical. He ended the engagement. Sloane called me that night. "You destroyed my future. You planned your future inside a house you never owned. You could still fix this. Sell it to us for what you owe." "No." She went silent, as if she had never imagined the word could remain standing after she pushed against it. Mom and Dad tried next. Dad said I could have allowed the ceremony to finish. "You had 10 days to ask me," I said. "You chose an audience instead." Mom said Sloane had lost everything because I cared more about property than family. I cared that none of you believed I had the right to refuse. They paid the storage and repair costs only after my attorney sent the photographs, contracts, and smart lock records. 3 months later, Dad mailed a check with a note. We thought you would come around. Mom still would not call the plan wrong. She said only that it had gone too far, as if the problem had been the size of the wedding instead of the decision to erase me from my home. I replied once, "Coming around is a choice. What you planned left me no choice at all." I replaced the locks, hired a local property service for emergencies, and stopped giving relatives access codes. Family visits happened in restaurants or at my parents' house. Then I opened the boxes. I rehung my photographs. I returned my clothes to the closet. I carried my books back to the shelves and removed the Rourke sign from the driveway. The last thing I found was the silver pen with white ribbon still tied around it. I placed it beside the old emergency key and the deed in my desk drawer. Months later, Sloan texted me, "Do you still think a house was worth all this?" I answered, "The house was never the test. Whether you believed I had the right to say no was." There was no quick reconciliation. The door was not locked forever. But blood no longer functioned as a key. They said I chose a house over my sister. The truth was, I only refused to disappear so she could move in. At sunrise, I stood at the glass doors and watched the lake turn gold. The emergency key rested beside the deed in my desk, and the last white ribbon lay in the trash. I had believed homes were protected by locks, cameras, and paperwork. Sometimes they are protected by one word spoken before an audience expects surrender no. Family access is not ownership, and being the capable child does not make your life available for redistribution. If your family has ever treated your home, money, or independence like shared property, tell me below. Subscribe for more stories where boundaries hold.